And I got to go see one.
Have you worked out of going to go to the big church? She went there to do it.
Well, I'm not sure.
Oh,
Well, you took a ride, I guess you wanted to ride.
Yeah.
I'll buy you the one.
She's on her way.
You left her already?
She's on her way.
Well, leave him alone. He's a freak for it. Yes? Am I blocking now?
You're blocking.
You're blocking. I gotta take that chair away.
No, not. So is this moving? We're not going to keep your chair here, no?
That's the right thing to do, actually.
I'm more different.
Completely different.
He walked in alone and everybody was so concerned.
First time I see her, it's not mine, it's George. He said, please for you. He knew that you were going to
We're going to be
come.
blocking you?
Yes.
So what should I do? Do I go out in a second and it's here or what?
It's okay. Maybe this is photograph of Madame Blavatsky.
I'm sorry.
No, that's not Madame Blavatsky. That's Annie Besson. Annie Besson.
This one,
Annie, and that's Madame Blavatsky. They didn't have this one earlier. They've had this very recently.
it was upstairs for 30 years.
It was like the George place, yeah? The George. George, chair. George chair. Because I remember I saw it.
Because I called right now.
Do you have 2 days? Oh, was that right? I just my
You here? Hey, how are you? So how did your picture work? Why?
No, I was wondering about it.
Nice to see you here. Yeah, better with my camera than I
Yes,
It's very pretty.
Except when Allan Cohen
Everyone came in, Allan Cohen, I went to the bathroom.
the people that are there,
So I said,
Could you put that flap up at the bottom plug? Yeah, that's good. That's better. Enough Do I look like Alan? Yeah, otherwise it's very
It's a curiosity if we actually have a separate gathering that may solve that problem. But so we do that next time. But then if we have a separate one, we get another 10. Polish name or something. Jewish. It's a restaurant.
so you have to make this
No, it's supposed to have started.
Really?
Okay. Whatever. Thank you.
But doesn't she live with their own regular dogs? Because of this sickness, because of the sickness, I can work, so I do I can.
That's just it.
That one's taken.
But
I'm gonna be doing it in November.
I thought you were going to speak though. Maybe I'll just let you.
Are you sure?
It's Allan Cohen, very famous Bible. I do. You see, I hate
$1.65. Oh God, we better get snap to it. Is it for sale or something?
But it was very cool.
But it's just think of the schools. Let's not. So.
Why are you?
I brought it to the next couple.
Yeah, you're going to be wired up for actually.
Oh, no.
That way. Okay, don't move. You knew it. This is what you've done.
no, it's very good.
You'll probably get better audio. Send it to me.
Hi, Mary. How are you? You survived the Northeast guy?
And Peter is.
Good for you.
Well, really.
Oh, where you left?
What kid you
I always go for Saturday. I felt like she's sick. I should have.
like Mr. Gives up everyone.
You can put any limit on your mind.
Well, then I went higher than his. Oh, and that's really cute.
I know there's a special tree there.
Yeah, no,
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Once you get wired, it sounds as if the movie.
My youngest daughter, yeah, I don't know what I say. When the Hilton goes up there, I'll say.
I will order in the store.
You were I'll take the whole thing.
Yeah, he wakes up at like 4:30. But he goes to bed at 7:30. This is 2000, what year? 2010. I mean, before electricity, I could see it, but
You might have a date by then. I'm sorry.
That's precisely what I was getting at.
Well, welcome everybody. The West Retreat about how we were starting tonight, we changed times from 8 o'clock to 7:30. So this being on the previous calendar newsletter, some of us thought we were starting at 8 o'clock anyway. We're very happy to have with us tonight Allan Cohen. Most of you know Allan. Allan started an early correspondence with Mayor Lala in the 60s and was asked by Lala to speak out against drugs in America, and with Rick Joplin and Robert Dreyfus, and he's given over 1,000 talks, radio and TV appearances.
But who's coming?
Somebody was.
Yes. At least somebody paid attention.
Here's an interesting little tidbit. He's been collaborating with Bob Lovers, who produced several episodes of The Sopranos, and are planning future series, bringing in spiritual themes.
Who knew that was such a spiritual show?
And he was also one, I didn't know, and he was one of only 6 Westerners to attend Bob's entombment in February of 1969. And there's a lot of other details here, but without further ado, I'm going to welcome Allan Cohen and look forward to hearing what he has to share with us.
You guys are. It is, thank you, Keith, and thank you for dinner tonight. It is wonderful to be back here. I always learn why it's wonderful after I'm here. But now I know. It's always here because this group is among the most thoughtful, sometimes the most controversial, the most penetrating, and in a city that Mayor Obama considered absolutely critical for his work. And the metropolitan area, you know what? Slight New Jersey, Sopranos would be bad. And especially because, in a certain sense, I get to feel not only Baba's pulse here, but the pulse of the experiences of the mature Baba people. Now, for the purpose, for the purpose of posterity, since this is being recorded, we need to make some disclaimers. First of all, the camera work. No. This is September 2010. And we must say that anything you hear tonight, we have the right to ask our camera people to turn off the cameras and the recordings at any time, in case we wish to get a little intimate here. Or there are issues you want to bring up that are not necessarily, could confuse posterity, which we wouldn't want to do. The other thing is that since any time I've ever seen anything that I've ever said before publicly, I've been embarrassed about. So I deny any credibility unfortunately not. For those of you in the future. And you should not take anything too seriously that you hear Michael say. And call me up to see if I still think that way. There's 5 years or so. But it's great. And I thought, what I do, because this is such a thoughtful group. This is not a passive group. Have you noticed?
We don't know another group.
Say that to every group.
No. And there's a lot of individualism. There's a lot of dedicated work that you've done, knowingly or unknowingly, for the very highest. Now, mostly unknowingly.
What kind of
First,
work?
I have to ask, is there anybody here that's new to Mayor Bob?
We're
All
all
right,
new
no
about
smart
it.
men. Smart. Okay, so I don't have to do Mayor Bob 101.
No.
Okay. Although I'd like to try it out later as a curricular to see if the curriculum could work. The other thing is, it does occur to me, in this disclaimer, that I may well fit this great saying. It may be that your sole purpose in life is simply to serve as a warning to others. So what you see is what you get. You know, all of us have, not all of us, but many of us have histories that are shady in some ways or others. And that's really almost necessary on the spiritual path. Notice when you may be an example, but as a kid you did goof around a lot. Still do. And yet, somehow, among tens of millions, billions of people who are associated in some way with spirituality, a very, very few souls are consciously now connected with the avatar, with the sign of Christ. And if you looked at our collective credentials, we don't deserve it. Right? I mean, they're saintly people around. And it's tough to explain, you know. But there are a lot of factors when you look at it that explain why Meher Baba's following, if you will, is a little narrow, it's a little slight. You would think that when the Christ came again, it would generate some attention. Well, it does to us. And to thousands, maybe tens of thousands if you edge the boundary a little bit. But not yet the impact on history. Now, if it is that those of us and most of the Bibles I talk to don't think they're quite worthy of sainthood quite yet, asking that question sets up a lot of other questions. I thought, particularly with this group, and particularly the people here, might introduce a slightly different theme. Because there's never a coincidence. And that is, let's look at Meher Baba's work in two different ways. One is the traditional way. And that is, what is Meher Baba's work on us? But the other one that has not received a lot of attention, partially I think because of a fear of arrogance or something. What is our work for him? You have to admit it. You're one of a few. How can this happen? And what's the responsibility? Is it that you're just veiled on the 6-plane and need a little push? Could be. Could be. We're not going to find out this lifetime, probably. That's what Mayor Baba says. And many of the discussions that are happening in the Baba world, the discussions of interpretation, what did Baba really, did he break his silence or not? Has the manifestation started? If it hasn't, will I be the first to get an email? What books are you supposed to read and have special powers to? To me, all of these things are actually very amusing, but I get a little nervous. And I figured, when you see that Meher Baba, in this incarnation, told everything, almost everything, about how it is, what it takes, what God is about, what the universe is about, and he wrote it in English. How could anyone screw it up in the future? How is it possible this time? Huh? For a long time I thought, not a chance. Now I'm wondering that the power of the ego can make a little, the desire of the ego to be special and to be in on it is very, very strong. When I see a lock of Baba's hair being advertised on eBay for $5,000, it got me a little nervous. You see people see that?
Yeah.
Get you a little nervous. I was telling a group at dinner that I would insist on a certificate of authenticity. Now, it's interesting that Bob had talked a huge amount about his work, about his universal work. And there are a lot of people in this room who have volunteered in some way or are spearheading major initiatives that are associated with Meher Baba's interface with the universe. I'm going to argue that some of the little stuff may be as important as the big stuff. But the question then is, if in fact Meher Baba is simply Avatar as spiritual master, what's he doing? Why are more people here? Something else must be going on. And he's pretty explicit about it. And part of it has to do with the end of the Kali Yuga. The ages and ages of really lousy consciousness. Bad enough so that apparently what was some of Rama Krishna's Manjali said, please, don't let me be born back at time. And if you look in the universal message, you'll find a very good description of the bad times that civilization can arrange. And he was there to change that and shift that. And it's been rather remarkable in the last perhaps 50 years, 60 or 70 years, of how that change is taking place. People are now much more explicit about their spiritual interest in each other. Not necessarily religious, but spiritual. It's kind of in. The word karma is English now. Nobody's here saying karma. That's all over the place. Guru is a word. Can you imagine that? 50, 60 years ago. And they get it. They get what bad karma is. They get what a guru is. In different ways. I knew things had changed when, on my way from the bus, some of these hot dog stands, and there was a guy, he looked American, but he was dressed in Buddhist robes, and he went up to the hot dog vendor with a big smile. And he said, make me one with everything. And so he waited, he got his hot dog, and he'd given him a $20 bill, and he said to the vendor, well, where's my change? The vendor looked back and said, change must come from within. It didn't really happen. but sorry. But the fact that people would come up with that joke even, very, very interesting. I don't know, Baba loved humor. There's a lot of instruction in that humor. He sneaks things in a very interesting way. One of them, there's a series called Zen Judaism. Seen that? It's very esoteric. Somewhere in this country I could not give these truths. One of the things is this, very Zen. Be here now. Be someplace else later. Is that so complicated? The Torah says, love thy neighbor as thyself. The Buddha says, there is no self. So maybe you're off the hook. If there's no self, who's afraid of this? And wherever you go, there you are. Your luggage is another story. Something that we, all Bible lovers, will resonate to. Accept misfortune as a blessing. Do not wish for perfect health or a life without problems. What would you talk about? Then somebody, deep thinker, I went to a bookstore and I asked the saleswoman, where's the self-help section? She said if she told me, it would defeat the purpose. There is a growing understanding, even in the literature of Western humor, as to the change in consciousness that's going on. In the discourses, Baba talked about his devotees being a relay station to generate, if you will, spiritual energy that Mayor Baba could use in his other work. Very interesting. He also talked about, even when he talked about breaking the silence, you start to look at what Baba was talking about. He emphasized the change of consciousness of the entire material world and other worlds. He talked about the levels of conscious beings, from plants all the way up to humans. He talked about the evolution, in fact, even of the earth, of the lower forms of consciousness. And that was the avatar's real work. That is, being one with everything and giving everything and everyone a boost, according to what they could take. That's why he wasn't jealous. The most kind-hearted avatar, look at that. You know, you wanted to worship Jesus? Fine. Good. Buddha, fine. Want to be an atheist? Cool. Just have a good heart. You're getting more points for having, if you will, faith in a religious point of view or ideology. There seemed to be a conflict, in a way, a paradox, between love and the intellect, between knowing things about theology living love. And Baba properly, he said, you know, basically when you get a chance, love is the highest. And it's the simplest. That's really Apple 101. But he also was very interesting. There were two things that really impressed me. One was the last chapter of God's Speaks. Do you remember that? It was a long chapter. Long chapter? What was it, 3 paragraphs? Basically, what did it suggest? It suggested that on one level, he had laid out to satisfy the minds of humans how it really worked. But in the big picture, that didn't matter, really. If one had real love. The intellect is not very highly valued by that. On the other hand, something else is. Baba wrote a letter to Angela Lee in 1939. She was kind of explaining. I mean, they were having hard times, and spoke intimately with Baba. And he said to her in the letter, "You speak truly and from deep experience when you say you can only learn through suffering and experience." To Delia's sister, Minta, in 1940, he said, "The often unnecessary suffering caused by his dearest and chosen ones is just because they do not understand him or his ways." And he said this gift of understanding is more precious than any other attribute of love, be it expressed in service or sacrifice. Love can be blind, selfish, greedy, ignorant, but love with understanding can be none of these things. Very interesting. So that understanding, and I think Rajiv once said that knowledge plus experience is understanding. The notion of knowing what Baba's messages and what his principles are assist greatly in processing experience. And, you know, Meher Baba asked for some heavy-duty processing. Really heavy-duty. Some of you have heard this, but I just love it when people complain. To quote a letter that the Mongoli sent Baba in Nasik early in the period when he had his disciples together. They were in a residential setting. This is on April 2nd. Baba was 36 years old. Some of the Mongoli actually got together and complained, wrote it, quote, "Staying with you is nothing but harassment. Life is so full of hardships now, there is no other thought in our minds and hearts except death. We look happy to others. We eat and drink with everyone who comes, but who sees the dagger piercing our hearts?" Heavy duty note. So Baba answers. What does he say? "It is my grace. This is my real mercy, which descends on a very, very select few. These are my friends. They are my lovers to whom I give the gift of sorrow and distress. It is a gift much greater than gold, of incalculable value, and not given to all. This gift is only for my beloved children. We masters can grant a world of gold or happiness and prosperity to others by our blessings, but this rare and great gift of privations, troubles and suffering is destined for only a few. No, don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. Remember that I love most those whose hearts I pierce, and who, though their hearts are wounded, stay with me and stick to me through thick and thin. Were I to use my dagger on outsiders, they would not dare approach me. I keep them happy with praise and encouragement, so that they may be in my contact and gradually be fit without a doubt to me in the real sense of the word. For my friend, I kill them, and it is my highest mercy on them. What is my mercy? What is my grace? It is your trouble and harassment. Very. Well, you can see why he might be unpopular to some. Now we know what's really going on, and it's good to be reminded every once in a while, because the flip side is very, very interesting for the possibility of a nuking them. The flip side of what happens to people internally who really get connected with Bob and who stay with him. Trouble is their middle name usually. It's guaranteed. It's guaranteed because Baba clearly laid out that his work with those who were dedicated, his work with them, with those souls, had to do with processing their sanskars, their impressions from past lives, millions of past lives, and especially the really hard ones, the ones that could take thousands of lives. He guaranteed we get pushed up in consciousness, told people not to repress, very interesting. Spiritual figures who say, let it hang out. Don't act on it, but be conscious of it. And the most difficult karmic situations, relationships. And I'm a psychologist. I still think that Baba people have the highest internal satisfaction ratio to the lousiest life experiences, I think, of the general population. The greatest challenges. But they're all relevant. That's the great thing. He says you don't waste a second. Any aggravation you have is very, very relevant in terms of how one handles it. The ability to detach from the sanskars that are brought up, that we experience as emotional, as mental conflict, as relationship conflict, all of this stuff is gold. Because it is the energy locked up in these sanskars that, when unleashed, generate incredible divine energy.
What means unleashed?
Unleashed, like Moki the dog has a leash.
Yes.
He sees another dog, you take him off the leash, he goes. That Mayor Baba, as you know, used to stir up opposition, if there was any. There's great energy in opposition. There's great energy latent in negativity, which, if released, is very, very powerful, very, very transformative. In a way, if we look at the way Baba says he's dealing with the world, it's very much like he deals with individuals. And that is getting the stuff out, having consciousness react, and consciousness transform. We're kind of seeing that now. Baba, folks, is very, very, very challenging. He basically is asking his lovers to kill themselves happily. And yet, here's the trick. Here's why this group is suspended. And yet to be functional. It was easy. Well, it was easy in the East. But it was cool to be killing yourself and dysfunctional. You're in a cave, and privations, and well, in a certain sense, the ego at least felt it was making some progress. Obama suggested it wasn't that much progress. Because the ego, or the false sense of self, that part of us that is really trapped in a drama, in a dream, in illusion, that part is very, very sneaky. And much of the discourses, for example, have to do with getting how it's possible to get trapped and how it's possible to get untrapped. And to make the connections that make it possible for the real self to come out. Baba was able to be very, very casual about human tragedy. Some, from ordinary traditions, would say, he just tossed off World War II, you know, like a bad sore. You know, they had to be processed. The agnostic, who has a real problem with if God is love, how can there be so much suffering? Well, Bob was pretty clear about that. And that is, not only is it necessary, but it's illusory. His analogy of the dream state, of what happens to our characters in dreams, is very, very elegant. Because when we dream of ordinary consciousness, our characters can feel very deep. Very deep. Tragically. You can even get knocked off. You have some pretty nasty experiences. And insofar as consciousness in the dream is concerned, it appears real. And it would be very, very difficult for our average dream, like suppose we went to Hawaii, an average dream. We're lounging on the beach in our dream. Somebody comes up with this. You're dreaming. Say, yeah, I am. This is dreaming. Well, this is great. No. You don't understand. You're really God. Huh? The real you has created this entire dream. I mean, all of Hawaii, the beach, all the people you see, all the trees, all the animals. You created. Sure. Sure I am. Totally unreasonable. And you as a character in the dream wouldn't believe it for a second. Oh, Mayor Baba comes and says, this is just one more higher level of the dream. Interesting. So he can love at the level of knowing that everything and everyone is one with him. And when he's not being complimentary, just saying, yes, you are really God. Actually, you really are. In a way, you know. It's literal. Literal. So, he can say stuff like this to the mom, like, your suffering is too. This is going to liberate your consciousness. Remember when he said, short, quick nightmare is better than a long, happy dream? Oh, yeah. Now, let's get back to the flip side of the equation. And it's something we don't ordinarily look at too much, but it's embedded in much of what Bob has written, even more. more what he said. And that is that because he's entered the dream and he created it, he will obey the rules that he's created. My wife occasionally asks me, why couldn't Bob make me God realize tomorrow? And if he could, why doesn't he? You know? And that's really, I mean, everybody could kind of say that. He's just withholding because he's mean. But it's the transformation of the entire dream that he's interested in. This is a huge break from Eastern mysticism of the past and spiritual mysticism, which almost from everything we have read and talked about in theological circumstances might be called ascendant spirituality. That is, the texts and the practices of almost all of the mystical religions of the past, or authentic spiritual practices, or even relationships with masters, had to do with the lower consciousness ascending to a higher sphere. And the implication of that, which was solidified in much practice in the East, was to get out of the illusion. Get out. Be free. See illusion as illusion. Bye. Bye, dream. Right? So the concept of nirvana in Buddhism, the concept of even of God realization in the mystic tradition, really emphasized the ascendance of individualized consciousness to universal consciousness. It is so ingrained in the study of mysticism that we don't even think about that. And in fact, almost everyone, including myself, in relating to what Theravada has said, looks at that element which is the ascendant element. In other words, how can I get to higher consciousness? How can I love Baba more? How can my limited consciousness be free? Theravada has introduced a wildly complementary but different concept. Heralded in a little bit, if you look at Ramakrishna and the writings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, you get the beginnings of this. You begin to understand why Vivekananda, when he came to the United States in the late 1800s, early 1900s, was so dedicated to getting this concept across to America. It begins to explain why Theravada was so interested in the future of spirituality being tied up with America. And it had to do with the notion now of descendant spirituality, which is particularly unique to the outer time. What's descendant spirituality? It's more the emphasis of bringing down divinity to spiritualize the dream. Doesn't make illusion real. But if you look at Theravada's evolutionary perspective, God is not done until all parts of the illusion get God realized. That's it's a long time. And if in fact has a lot to do with his suffering, as you some of you read, perfect masters generally don't really suffer. They kind of act like they suffer, but they don't really, because they don't buy into the illusion on that level. Mayor Bala talked about a great difference with the avatar, who actually does take a human body, and feels a human body, and experiences all parts of the universe. In other words, gets involved with the dream. And so when he was talking about giving a boost to humanity, to the world, and when you look at that concept of his manifestation in a different way, if you look at the advice he gave to his lovers in different ways. Should I leave my family and come to India? I would really like to do that. Say, do you take me as God? Yes, Bob, I take you as God. Where is God? Well, Bob, God is everywhere. Not in Detroit. The interest Mayor Bala took in the careers, the children, the geography, the actual types of work that his lovers did. Mayor G. Carter ran a filter manufacturing. Well, it's tough to relate that to higher spirituality, except in fun ways. But Bob was interesting. Remember the instance of him, Baba, involving his lovers in the manufacturing and distributing company, eating clarified butter, highly prized and usually adulterated. They lost money doing that. Still wanted to do that. Another example I saw more closely. There was a Baba lover in San Francisco named Fred Frey. And Fred and his wife got interested in, as the culture turned away from breastfeeding, to the issue of infant formulas. And they really wanted to improve the nutrition and the freshness of infant formula. So they set up a business to do that. And they did it very, very well. It's a wonderful product. And of course, they priced themselves out of the market. So they had to lower the prices, and they started losing money. And this time, Baba was in the body. And they wrote to Baba and said, Baba, it's going well on one level. It's not going too well on the business level. Baba writes back, God, that's fine. Go ahead. A year later, they're deeper in the hole. And they write, Baba, we're really actually starting to hurt economically. This is really, I mean, we've tried everything, and there's just no way we can get this high quality in there and be able to make it. Bob writes back, oh, keep going for a while. Keep going. And then, 6 months later, 8 months later, they're like, Baba, this is out of control. We are actually almost broke now. It just can't work. We just we're going to close it down. We just wanted to let you know. Well, Bob writes back, no, you're not going to close it down. Keep it going. He says, because I am working through that formula with those children. So, instant after instant, if you look beyond what Mayor Baba may have told some of his lovers to do, there are two deeper connections. One is that they operate as, if you will, those relay stations in divinizing other parts of the post-Kali Yuga dream. And that's one of the functions. I know it's a tough responsibility to put on this group. But that's one of the functions of that relationship with the avatar. That is one of the reasons why there are so few. Because A, you have to have had a history with the avatar to put up with this kind of challenge, number one. And number two, you have to be able to, the structure of your sanskaras, of your subtle and mental bodies, have to be strong enough and clear enough to channel that force. Remember what Baba would occasionally say when he was doing some work, don't anybody touch him, because they could be fried, electrocuted or something like that. Literally, let him get it. Dealing with that kind of energy is very, very, very compelling. Very, very powerful. And not everybody is built to take it. And shouldn't. I know the Baba folks who've tried everything to get their friends to come to Baba. Everything. Not happening. Shouldn't happen. This lifetime, that's not to worry about it. He's not interested in numbers, he's interested in